Okay, let's continue to kind of chisel this character out. So the other thing you can do is when you're doing these hard edge effects with a pencil brush or something like this, you can bump back the opacity. And this actually can work really well because you can slowly build up the effect, and it kind of looks like cell shading at first, but then as you overlap it a few times, it offers a really neat kind of dynamic to it. So try that out as well. Again, we can utilize this to kind of hide some of those bad lines as we go. We can use this to texture. I'll keep our light source in mind. Bring a little bit of light down here. That big axe head's going to block it. Notice I'm using that light to kind of show the segmentation. I can show a little bit of specularity even on this type of material. So for here I could block in kind of this bigger shape right here at first. Something like that. And then I could come back each time kind of hitting the highest point, and then come back and blend that off. Blend that back. So, you know, any number of ways you could try to do this. And if you, again, you're not sure where this should go, where the light source should go, where the shadow should go, maybe just use your layers over top. So you haven't seen me do that a whole lot as I've worked through this, but I've been painting a long time where I pretty much know where it needs to go, and I know how to edit my way out of it if something's not right. But if not, just remember layers can be your best friend. All you have to do is use a floating layer over top, add your paint, and then merge it down. So just kind of playing around with it. And you know, what's neat about doing this is as you get more and more of this on the page, you start to kind of figure out the next best step. Like, for instance, I might jump back to a soft shadow and get the bicep here a little bit more rounded. I feel like there's going to be more of this in shadow. Now that I've defined that light source down here, I've kind of imagined that the axe head is, you know, pretty much casting a shadow. So for instance, actually I'll even just try the floating layer just to show you what I meant. You can even take a solid effect. Okay, the neat thing about the solid effect is you don't have to worry about is it overlapping, is it making artifacts, basically. So you fill this in as a solid, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to imagine what this axe head, this big shadow, this axe head might be casting on this character. So I have to go around the anatomy, and also I have to think about maybe what the shape might look like as it reacts off this character. And I'm just going to say it hits up here. So I kind of like the light source on that buckle, so I'm actually going to probably do away with this. I don't know if this, or you know, I could probably just say, let's hit Command-Shift-T. Let's go ahead and bring this back a little bit. Let's just say that the light source is only to about there. And let's fill that in. So anyways, by using this as another layer like this, we've got more options. So if we would have drew that in, and especially on that main layer, we would have been stuck with whatever we got. But we can now punch back the opacity of it. And I'm not sure why it's, oh, because I'm still set to multiply. Forgive me. Don't do that. So you want to, let's isolate this area. Go back to full, isolate it, fill it in. It's got to be set to normal mode. That is the drawback to changing your blend modes. Okay, so now bump back the opacity. Get whatever you think the shadow needs to be at its darkest point. Take a nice big soft erase brush, soft hair brush. And what you want to do, or at least what I like to do, is erase it back on the one side a little bit more. Okay, I just feel it looks more natural. I might even erase some of this top edge. So what I'm kind of picturing is that it would be darker back here. In fact, I could even take an airbrush and I could just throw in a little bit more darkness right to this arm side so that it's noticeable that it's changing, you know, a little bit darker from this side over to the chest in the middle. So that's just, something you could do if you like that. I'm going to leave that as a floating layer so I can kind of wonder a bit if I might want to keep that. But because once you merge it, then you've got to make sure that the rest of your paintwork is where you want it. So I'm going to leave that as a floating layer and just call that X shadow. Just like that. Okay, so back to this part. And let's go ahead and tighten up on the head here a little bit and start to get some of this in there. So again, light source up on these. Depending on how detailed you want these to look, you could have some of the light catching each ridge like that. You can have a stronger light source on the one side, and then some other lights on the inside, or other light that's managing to hit the inside. So just little things like that. And let's go ahead and blend some of this. Again, as we do this, we're getting rid of those sketch lines. And it's real easy for me to spend an absorbent amount of time doing this part. So it's tough to actually teach it because telling myself to move faster so that it doesn't appear to be such a lengthy process. But it really is a lengthy process. Like, no matter how fast I move, it takes time. But in comparison to what you get and what you can complete and the imaginative stuff you can create, I feel like the time is actually pretty fast. It's actually very, very advantageous and worthwhile. Obviously, that's why so many people are, when they're accomplished artists, they become very sought after. You get people contacting you all over the place just asking you to do stuff because it is very impactful. This stuff has a lot of potential, very powerful stuff. You just have to get confident at it, good at it, to where if you're throwing a different concept, it doesn't bother you. You can just do your same process and get it done. And once that's kind of out there, once people realize you're capable of that, you generally won't have any shortage of work. You start picking and choosing your battles a little more, I think. You can pick and choose what jobs you want to participate on. So you see I'm blending some of it and other parts I'm not. I'm just like leaving some of it a bit more scratchy, and I think that you want a nice variation. You don't want it all to be clean. So, and then as I go back through, I just sculpt it. So I select from a certain area, kind of picturing what the shadow would be over here, something like that. So yeah, I'm just sculpting the work. I think if you kind of think about it like that, it's better for you. Maybe a shadow a little more on this side. Okay, again, I love this pencil brush. I'm sure it's not really ideally used for this, but with the transparency turned down, you can get some really neat, quick shadows. And again, kind of sculpt out the character a bit with those. I think all this will be in shadow. And let's go back to the other one and switch it to white. Get a little bit of light source going over here. Let's make that a little brighter so I don't have to bump up the opacity. And also some of this texture here. So what I'll do with this part is I'll kind of texture back and forth with this. And even the light source a little bit mixed in. See, I'm using a little bit heavier brush stroke here. And that's purposefully because I'm going to blend this around. I don't want these to really look like lines as much as they do when they're first applied. And let's see, a little bit of light source in here while I'm here. So I'm also trying to get these plane changes. And there's going to be a more focused light through the middle, so a little bit more of a specular kind of feel. So let's go ahead and blend this back now. So you see, once I start to blend it, it looks a little more like a texture than brush strokes, and that's what I want. So I'm just pushing that information back. Like that. And while we're here, let's go ahead and select this area. Give us a bit of a drop shadow from that big shoulder plate there. And then remember that you can just blend this back a little bit. Actually, let's go ahead and use the blur for that. Oh yeah, much nicer. Okay, so now, actually let's try that blur over some of these. Still got some artifacts in there that I'm trying to clean up. Okay, so let's pull back and take a look at this. So yep, little by little, it's coming together. So I feel like there needs to be some more light source on the anatomy as well now. So I'll sample from that light source. Just block in some big shapes here and there. Just to round out these forms basically. Then go back to my blend. And I usually will blend more to one side, but I'll generally blend all the way around since I don't want a very defined line there. But I don't know, sometimes I like it as far as a kind of stylized version, but you got to be careful not to place it everywhere. So you'll see I blend a lot of that back. But regardless, I want the light source there to help start to round out the anatomy a bit more. Okay. And I almost feel like there would be a little bit of a glare going across this material. So I'll probably add that, but I'll wait to do that. So again, just kind of dropping in little bits of light source and blending it back. And I could use just a little bit of edge light just to separate this big hulking chest from the arm. Something like that. Just try to be subtle about it. I think it's helpful to, try to perceive things in a rounded way. So for instance, if the light's coming from this one side and it's hitting the side of the leg, if this is rounded, then this starts to fade off. So actually thinking about that is kind of the best way to get this all working. Working as a dimensional kind of illustration. So don't just don't draw and paint where you think it goes. Try to think about the roundedness of the form, the character. Perceive them in a dimensional way, and hopefully that'll translate into your illustration. All right, so we're getting there. So I think at this point, a lot of this is just going to be redundant. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and kick this into time lapse. I won't bore you with all my noodling around here. So with that, let's move on to the next lesson and time lapse this process and get this character refined.